Hello and welcome to my channel, and today is Thursday, so we're going to do another episode of True Crime Tales on Thursday. As always, we have a content warning, graphic description of crime scenes, graphic description of death, and bad things. Today we're going to be talking about Chris Benoit. Most people know him as a WWE, I believe, fighter, and we're going to be talking about the double murder and suicide there. Over a 3-day period between June 22nd and 24th, 2007, Chris Benoit, a 40-year-old Canadian professional wrestler employed by World Wrestling Entertainment, murdered his wife Nancy and their 7-year-old son Daniel before hanging himself at their residence in Fayetteville, Georgia. The autopsy results showed that Benoit's wife was murdered first, having died of asphyxiation on the night of June 22nd. Daniel, who also died of asphyxia, was killed as he was lying sedated in his bed on the morning of June 23rd. On the evening of June 24th, Benoit died by suicide in his weight room, where he used his lat pull-down machine to hang and kill himself. He placed Bibles near the bodies of his wife and son. Since the tragedy, numerous explanations for Benoit's actions have been proposed, including severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy, so CTE, and steroid and alcohol abuse, leading to a failing marriage and other personal problems. This led to numerous media accounts and a federal investigation into steroid abuse in professional wrestling. On Friday, June 22, 2007, Chris Benoit killed his wife Nancy in the bonus room of their house in Fayetteville, Georgia, a suburb of Atlanta. According to the police report, Nancy's limbs were bound prior to her death, with her arms being restrained with coaxial cables and her feet being duct taped together. A balled-up combination of a tube sock and tape was also found in the kitchen trash and appeared to be soaked in dried blood, which led police to believe that it was being used as a makeshift gag prior to Nancy's death. Her body was found wrapped in a blanket alongside a Bible. Injuries indicated that Benoit had pressed a knee into her back while pulling on a cord around her neck, causing strangulation. Officials said that there were no signs of immediate struggle. Toxicologists found alcohol in Nancy's body but were unable to determine whether it had been present before death or was a product of decomposition. Decomposition also made it difficult to estimate pre-death levels of hydrocodone and alprazolam, which were found at therapeutic levels in her body. In any case, the medical examiner saw no evidence that Nancy was as sedated as her son had been when he was killed. Daniel Christopher Benoit was Chris's third child and second son, having older paternal half-siblings named David and Megan via Chris's first wife, Martina, who were all living in Canada at the time the murder-suicide took place. He was Nancy's only child, as she had no children with her ex-husbands Jim Doss or Kevin Sullivan. Daniel was suffocated and killed in his bedroom, and another Bible was left by his body. He had internal injuries to the throat area, showing no bruises. Daniel's exact time of death is unknown. The reports determined Daniel was sedated with Xanax and likely unconscious when he was killed. His body had also just started to show signs of decomposition, but was not as far along as his mother's body. It was later alleged that Daniel had the genetic disorder Fragile X syndrome, and that this was the cause of domestic problems in the Benoit family. It was also suggested that track marks on Daniel's arms were the result of human growth hormone injections, because Benoit and his family considered him undersized due to his condition. Benoit's co-worker and close friend, wrestler Chris Jericho, stated that from his own research on the condition, the symptoms fit Daniel to a T, all across the board. Considering those who had publicly stated that they had no knowledge of Daniel having the condition, Jericho said if Chris had decided that he wanted to keep it to himself, you wouldn't have been able to pry that out of him with anything. Despite Jericho's initial statements regarding Daniel, he later stated in his 2011 book, Undisputed, it turned out that Daniel didn't have Fragile X, but at the time it made sense because I was grasping at straws. District Attorney Scott Ballard later released a statement saying that a source with access to Daniel's medical records found no mention of any pre-existing mental or physical ailments. Likewise, Daniel's teachers reported that he was on par with the other students and not about to be held back as previously thought. Speaking publicly for the first time in a major public interview on a Talk is Jericho podcast, Speaking publicly for the first time in a major public interview on a Talk is Jericho podcast in 2016, Nancy's sister Sandra Tofoloni unequivocally denied any claims that Daniel had ever had Fragile X or any other similar condition. She also stated that claims of needle track marks on Daniel's arms were preposterous. At about 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturday, June 23rd, 2007, fellow wrestler and close friend Chavo Guaro received a voicemail message from Benoit's phone stating that both Nancy and Daniel had food poisoning and he would be late for that night's house show in Beaumont, Texas. Guaro called Benoit back and found that Benoit sounded tired and groggy as he confirmed everything that he had said in his voice message. Guaro, who grew concerned about Benoit's tone and demeanor, called him back 12 minutes later. Benoit did not answer, and Guaro left a voicemail message asking Benoit to call him back. At 3:44 p.m., Benoit called Guaro back, stating that he had not answered the call because he was on the phone with Delta Airlines changing his flight. He stated that he had a stressful day due to Nancy and Daniel's purported food poisoning. Guaro then replied with, quote, "All right, man, if you need to talk, I'm here for you," end quote. Benoit ended the conversation by saying, quote, "Chavo, I love you," end quote. During a 2014 appearance on the Talk is Jericho podcast, Guaro said Benoit sounded off when he talked to him, especially when he said, "I love you," with emphasis. Another coworker who often traveled with Benoit called him from outside the Houston airport. Benoit answered and told the coworker that Nancy was vomiting blood and that Daniel was also vomiting. Benoit failed to show up for the house show in Beaumont and left a voicemail on Guaro's cell phone saying that he would be on a flight that would arrive in Houston at 8 a.m. Central Time on the following Sunday morning. During this time, Benoit also called and left a voicemail for an unknown friend. On Sunday, June 24th, 2007, 5 text messages were sent to coworkers between 3:51 a.m. and 3:58 a.m. using both Chris and Nancy's cell phones. 4 of them were the Benoit's home address. The 5th said that the family's dogs were in the enclosed pool area and that a garage side door had been left open. Guaro and WWE referee Scott Armstrong were 2 of the recipients of these texts. Guaro was woken up by the text and went back to sleep, reasoning that he would ask Benoit about the text when he picked him up at the Houston airport in a few hours. Benoit failed to show at the Houston airport on the flight that arrived at 8 a.m. Later that morning, Benoit called WWE's Talent Relations Office, stating that his son was vomiting and that he and Nancy were at a hospital with him. He also stated that he would be taking a later flight into Houston, where he was scheduled to face CM Punk for the vacant ECW World Championship at the Vengeance Night of Champions pay-per-view event that night. Benoit failed to appear for the event. According to District Attorney Ballard and the county sheriff, Benoit committed suicide by hanging. He removed the bar from a lap pull-down machine in his exercise room and fashioned the end of a cord from the machine into a noose. He then released the weights, causing his strangulation. Ballard said Benoit was found hanging from the pulley cable. On the 2016 Talk is Jericho podcast, Toffoloni claimed that over the weekend the search history on Benoit's computer showed he had researched the quickest and easiest way to break a neck. He had then later used a towel around his neck attached to the handle of the machine, which he pulled down using a very heavy weight and let go, breaking his neck instantly. However, the police report done by Fayette County Sheriff's Office states he showed no damage to his neck area other than that which came from the cable around his neck. It also states the only topic he researched on his computer during that time was the prophet Elijah's resurrection of a dead child. No mention of the claims made by Toffoloni were present in the police report, and his autopsy report made no mention of damage to Benoit's cervical vertebrae, hyoid bone, trachea, or larynx area, further indicating he didn't snap his neck as a manner of suicide. On Monday, June 25th, 2007, WWE wrestlers and executives arrived in Corpus Christi for WWE Raw, which was to take place at the American Bank Center. As the early hours of the afternoon progressed and the show got closer to starting, executives were increasingly concerned that they had not heard from Benoit in over 24 hours. Guaro then showed Vice President of Talent Relations Johnny Laurantis, aka Johnny Ace, the text that he and Armstrong had received from Chris and Nancy's cell phones in the early hours of Sunday. As some more time progressed without any contact from Benoit, WWE called the Fayetteville Police Department and asked for a welfare check at the Benoit household. After discovering the bodies, the police notified WWE around 4:15 p.m., informing them they had discovered 3 bodies at the Benoit home and the house was now ruled as a major crime scene. A suicide note was not discovered during the initial investigation, but one was later discovered in a Bible that had been among Benoit's possessions that were sent to his first wife Martina and their 2 children in Canada. Benoit's father Michael stated that Chris had left a handwritten notation in there saying, quote, "I'm preparing to leave this earth," end quote. However, during a 2020 interview with Chris Van Vliet, Chris's eldest son David stated Chris didn't leave a suicide note and showed no indication that anything was wrong in their conversations prior to the tragedy. He had also revealed Chris had planned for him to visit from Canada the week following the murders. A memorial for Nancy and Daniel took place in Daytona Beach, Florida on July 14, 2007. Both were cremated and their ashes placed in starfish-shaped urns for Nancy's family. Chris was also cremated, following a private memorial in Ardrossan, Alberta, on August 6, 2007, but the fate of his ashes has not been publicly revealed. Neuroscientist and former wrestler Christopher Nowinski argued that Benoit, may have been suffering from repeated, unrelated concussions throughout his wrestling career, ultimately leading to an unstable mental state. Nowinski was quoted as saying that Benoit was one of the only guys who would take a chair shot to the back of the head, which is stupid. Tests conducted on Benoit's brain by Julian Bales, the head of neurosurgery at West Virginia University, showed Benoit's brain was so severely damaged it resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. Other tests conducted on Benoit's brain tissue revealed severe chronic traumatic encephalopathy and damage to all four lobes of the brain and brain stem. Bales and his colleagues concluded that repeated concussions can lead to dementia, which can attribute to severe behavioral problems. Benoit's father said that the brain damage may have been the leading cause of the murder-suicide. A statement released by WWE described the findings as speculative. Nancy had filed for divorce in May 2003, allegedly after domestic abuse from Benoit, but had withdrawn it 3 months later. In February 2008, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported that Nancy may have suspected her husband of having an affair with a female WWE wrestler, and that they may have also argued over a life insurance policy. The AJC claimed their source was a recently released report from the Fayette County Sheriff's Office. The deaths at the Benoit household were first reported to fans of WWE via the company's mobile alert service and posted to its official website soon after. On its corporate website, the company released the following statement. Quote, World Wrestling Entertainment was informed today by authorities in Fayette County, Georgia, that WWE's superstar Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and his son were found dead in their home. Authorities are investigating, but no other details are available at this time. Instead of its announced programming for tonight on USA Network, WWE will air a 3-hour tribute to Chris Benoit. Chris was beloved among his fellow superstars and was a favorite among WWE fans for his unbelievable athleticism and wrestling ability. He always took great pride in his performance and always showed respect for the business he loved, for his peers, and towards his fans. This is a terrible tragedy and an unbearable loss. WWE extends its sincere condolences and prayers to the surviving members of the Benoit family and their loved ones in this time of tragedy. After WWE promoter Vince McMahon had gathered the wrestlers together to tell them that Chris, Nancy, and David had all died. The company canceled the scheduled 3-hour-long live Monday Night Raw show that had been scheduled for a few hours later, which coincidentally was supposed to be a memorial for the Mr. McMahon character, who on the June 11th episode of Monday Night Raw died in a limo explosion, with the remainder of the ensuing angle canceled entirely. That was scheduled to take place at the American Bank Center and replace the broadcast version with a tribute to Benoit's life and career, featuring past matches, segments from the Hard Knocks, the Chris Benoit Story DVD, and comments from wrestlers and announcers from the WWE Raw, SmackDown, and ECW brands. Shortly after the program aired, many of the aired comments were posted on WWE.com. It was not until the last hour of the tribute program that successive reports surfaced that Chris, Nancy, and Daniel had all died on different days over the weekend, and that the police were not looking for any other suspects. The following night, Tuesday, June 26th, after details of the murder-suicide became available, WWE aired a recorded statement by McMahon before its ECW broadcast. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Last night on Monday Night Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute show recognizing the career of Chris Benoit. However, now some 26 hours later, the facts of this horrific tragedy are now apparent. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name tonight. On the contrary, tonight's show will be dedicated to everyone who has been affected by this terrible incident. This evening marks the first step of the healing process. Tonight, WWE performers will do what they do better than anyone else in the world: entertain you. On Friday, June 29th, before that week's edition of SmackDown, McMahon released another statement indicating that the related events of the tragedy were not known to WWE at the time. The rest of the statement remained the same as the first one. On a recent edition of Raw, the WWE presented a special tribute showing recognizing the career of Chris Benoit. However, the facts of this horrific tragedy involving Chris were not known at the time. Therefore, other than my comments, there will be no mention of Mr. Benoit's name in this program. On the contrary, this show is dedicated to everyone who has been affected by the terrible incident. This marks the first step of the healing process whereby WWE performers will now do what they do better than anyone else in the world: entertain you. After learning about the full details of the murder-suicide, WWE quickly distanced itself from Benoit. Except for his results and listings in WWE's title history, though the summaries of his title reigns have been removed, and select press releases from WWE's corporate subsite, the WWE website removed all past mentions of Benoit, including all news articles related to the specific details of the incident, as well as his biography and the video tribute comments from Benoit's peers. WWE pulled the tribute episode from international markets that aired Monday Night Raw on a tape delay basis. Several channels announced the episode was being withheld for legal reasons. A substitute Raw, hosted by Todd Grisham from WWE Studios, was created featuring recaps of WWE Championship and World Heavyweight Championship matches that had occurred over the past year. Benoit's name was removed from his previous theme song, Rabid, on the MP3 release of WWE Anthology. Benoit, along with his crippler crossface and other signature moves, were removed from the WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 video game after Benoit was originally included in the game as a playable character. Starting with WWE SmackDown vs. Raw 2010, the move was reinstated as crossface. WWE Classics On Demand, WWE's subscription video on demand service, began removing the likeness and mentions of both Benoit and Nancy from archival footage. Matches and other footage involving Benoit appeared very sparingly on any WWE DVD release following his death, with all of them being footage involving multiple wrestlers such as Battle Royal or a multiple-person tag team match. The WCW War Games DVD by WWE, which features all of the War Games matches, does not include the 1997 Fall Brawl World Games match between the NWO and the Four Horsemen, featuring Benoit, who was not involved in the finish of the match, but has commentary about Benoit edited out. A parental advisory warning is shown before a program that features Benoit. Benoit's name was finally mentioned as part of the WWE Network's Monday Night Wars series about the fall of WCW. This would be the first time since WWE never mentioned his name in June 2007. A segment in this series talked about the 2000 Invasion storyline with Benoit and his radical stablemates Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn. However, barring an establishing shot, Benoit was also omitted from all footage and photographs featured of the group. Canadian rock band Our Lady Peace, who had written his entrance theme song Whatever in 2001, were asked if they would ever perform the song again in a 2012 interview with the Huffington Post. Band members Rain Maida and Steve Mazur responded that they felt they could not, given the circumstances of Benoit's death. WWE included the moment when Randy Orton pinned Benoit at SummerSlam 2004 to capture his first World Heavyweight Championship and a promotional video for the match between Orton and John Cena. However, Benoit's face cannot be seen. This was also done in videos for the build-up to Orton's 14th World Championship win against Drew McIntyre in 2020. And Kurt Angle's WWE Hall of Fame video upon his induction in 2017, WWE briefly showed a clip of his match with Benoit. However, the shot is distant and Benoit's face cannot be seen. A fan showed an image of Benoit in a prominently featured position during McIntyre's segment. This was apparently the last picture of Benoit taken before his death. Hulk Hogan commented on Benoit's personality and his thoughts on the crime, saying he was peaceful and kept to himself. I think it had to be something personal, a domestic problem between him and his wife. Bret Hart also commented on his personality, stating, I never saw him lose his temper or act strange or weird. I don't remember Chris as being a guy who took a lot of pills or drank too hard. I think you'll find over the next few weeks this steroid thing was played up too much. This is not WWE's fault, and this is not Vince McMahon's fault. Chris Benoit was responsible for his own actions. Eric Bischoff saying it's clear that the media wants to blame steroids, professional wrestling, Vince McMahon, or anyone or anything else that further sensationalizes this family's tragedy. I refuse to join the choir. I don't have enough information. I wasn't there. I'm not a psychiatrist. I just can't imagine how or why this could have happened. Other wrestlers commented, including Mark Marrow, Ted DeBase Sr., Randy Orton, Kevin Nash, Lance Storm, Chyna, Steve Blackman, Rob Van Dam, The Ultimate Warrior, New Jack, John Cena, Chris Jericho, and William Regal. Vince McMahon and his wife Linda were interviewed by various news outlets. Some wrestlers, such as Dr. Death, wrote posts on their websites and social media pages. When the news broke about Benoit's death, most mainstream news outlets covered the story, including MSNBC and Fox News. The Benoit incident made the cover of People magazine. ECW Press, which has no affiliation with Extreme Championship Wrestling, announced on July 16th that noted wrestling writer Ivan Muchnick had written a book on the case, due out in 2008. At the Comedy Central roast of Flavor Flav in August 2007, Jimmy Kimmel joked to honoree Flavor Flav that Chris Benoit is a better father than Flavor Flav, which drew a shocked response and laughs from the crowd. The show aired less than 2 months after the incident, but no reference was made to the taping date of the episode in question. Bill Apter in 2015 speculated the murders were a professional hit. Phil Aston's attorney, Manny Aurora, asked a judge to throw out evidence seized during a raid on Aston's office after the murder-suicide. He claimed the search exceeded authority granted in a search warrant and that police seized other patients' records and 3 years of bank and computer records. According to the Associated Press in February 2008, Aston was charged with overprescribing medication in a case not connected to Benoit. On January 29, 2009, Aston admitted he illegally prescribed drugs, sometimes without examining the patients first, and pleaded guilty to all 175 counts against him. He was sentenced to only 10 years in prison. A statement regarding Nancy's death was added to the Chris Benoit English Wikipedia article 14 hours before police discovered the bodies of Benoit and his family. This seemingly prescient addition was initially reported on Wiki News and later on Fox News. The article originally read, Chris Benoit was replaced by Johnny Nitro for the ECW World Championship match at Vengeance, as Benoit was not there due to personal issues stemming from the death of his wife Nancy. The phrase stemming from the death of his wife Nancy was added at 4:01 a.m. EDT on June 25th, whereas the Fayette County Police reportedly discovered the bodies of the Benoit family at 2:30 p.m. The IP address of the editor was traced to Stamford, Connecticut, which at the time was also the location of WWE headquarters. After news of the early death notice reached mainstream media, the anonymous poster accessed Wiki News to explain his edit as a huge coincidence and nothing more. The poster responsible for the edit was later identified as Matthew Greenberg, a then 19-year-old student at the University of Connecticut. Police detectives seized computer equipment from the man held responsible for the postings and called the posting an unbelievable hindrance to their investigation, but believed Greenberg was otherwise uninvolved, declining to press charges. Greenberg had found several rumors online which supported his theory about the Benoit family emergency, as reported in Wrestling News. The IP from which he made the edit was tentatively traced to vandalizing other Wikipedia entries. In the years following the murder-suicide, it continued to be referred to in the media. The Great American Bash pay-per-view on July 20th, 2008 was the last WWE pay-per-view with a TV-14 rating. WWE immediately thereafter adopted their current TV PG rating, which resulted in a noticeable toning down of edgy content in its broadcast. Within a few months, blood was severely toned down, which returned WWE's product to its pre-1997 rule on prohibiting deliberate bleeding in matches. And that's pretty much it. That is the story of Chris Benoit and the homicide/suicide that took place. I have no opinion on professional wrestling. I mean, you do what you gotta do. Some people really enjoy it. I'm not a big fan of wrestling, but I'm not gonna sit here and say that I think that has anything to do with what happened in this situation. I would like to say to the family and loved ones of Nancy and Daniel and Chris that I am very sorry for your loss. It's never easy. And I definitely do think on some occasions there should be more done to protect wrestlers, especially in the head area, such as helmets or brain covers, like whatever you've got that you can put on the head. And that probably does need to be looked into a little more. It is very dangerous, much like football. But I don't really think that should reflect on the entire wrestling world. As always, please don't do anything I wouldn't do. Be cautiously kind to others and make good choices. And I'll see y'all next week. Bye.